So my name is Brenda Custodio, and I am going to be joined by my co-presenter, Judith O'Loughlin. I'm going to do the first half of the presentation, and she's going to do the second half. See all the little dings we're getting? So let me start this slideshow. And we are going to be talking to you today about helping our newcomers become resilient. And we use something that came from a lady from Europe, Edith Grotberg. She came up with this idea of I have, I am, I can. And she uses these three terms for helping people who have experienced some kind of trauma to become resilient. And we're going to talk about how we can use her plan with our English learners. So I am a former ESL teacher and building administrator in Columbus, Ohio. Judith is a former elementary teacher and adult ed teacher who worked in New Jersey, and now she is out in California, where she said she can't see the sun today because of the ash and the smoke, unfortunately, so keep her in mind. Okay, so why are we going to focus on newcomers? So first of all, who is a newcomer? Most people use this definition that someone who's been in the country less than 2 years and is not yet proficient in English. So what kind of unique needs do newcomers have that might require that they need some help to build their resilience? Well, first of all, they need English language development. So not all people who come new to the country are not yet proficient in English, but those are the students who are going to need the most help. Many of them will need first language support, especially our students with interrupted education. And the earlier presentation that we did was on SIFE or SLIFE, which is students with interrupted schooling. And often those are the students who have limited first language skills as well as limited English. So they need support as they develop both languages. They often are behind in content knowledge, and they may need orientation to their new society and their new culture. And then, of course, they're also the most at risk of experiencing trauma and loss. So we know that we all experience adversity from time to time, and none of us are going to forget 2020. Adversity and 2020 are going to be right up there together in the same sentence. But the kinds of adversity that we are facing is often not the kind that our students have faced. Ours is often more personal. Theirs is even community-wide or even country-wide. There are many day-to-day challenges that we're facing, but we're thinking about the kinds of long-term, what we call chronic trauma that our students are facing and how we can help them. So for our newcomers, we as teachers are sometimes the only one who's the person who's in a position to provide that stability and the routine that newcomers need. So how can we help them to connect to the school and to community supports that may be there, they just don't know where they are or how to get in touch with them. So it either as us as classroom teachers or as someone within the school community or even maybe community connections that we have are important to help our students and our families to get this support that they need. So we're going to start with looking at a student. This is a real, the picture isn't real, but the story is real. This is Abraham, and it was in a magazine that Judy and I read a few years ago, and it was about a boy from Togo. He came here at the age of 14. It didn't really say if he came with his parents, but we're assuming he did. He had a lot of difficulties adjusting to school. School was very, very different here. Teacher expectations were different. You know, those of you, obviously, when you're working in ESL, you know that discipline practices can sometimes be an issue. Our American students don't act or react the same way that a lot of our immigrant students do. And when the immigrant students see it, they wonder what's going on. The youth culture is so different, male-female interaction, and of course the language. He was living in New York City, which of course I've lived there a couple years, and Judy was born there, so we know it's a whole world to itself. And he had difficulty adjusting to life there. He was attacked once by gangs. His good friend was actually killed in a gang problem. When he would dress as a Muslim, like on Friday to go to prayers, he would be targeted. He faced racism for the first time, being for skin color issues. And when asked what helped him the most with his new life, he immediately mentioned his teacher. So this was a study that was conducted by someone who was looking for students on how they were able to adjust to new life. And when they asked Ibrahim what helped him, he says, "It was my teacher, Miss Laurie." So his ninth grade English teacher, Miss Laurie, she was the one who helped him to translate his class materials, those dreaded Regents exams that are part of life in New York City, helped him with the college application process, and just helped him just listening to it, helping him through the whole rest of his high school. In fact, he says that he's now in college and he still would go back to her for help with different kinds of issues, both academic and non-academic. So when we think about resilience, what are we actually talking about? To be resilient, a learner has to be able to recover from negative events or feelings. You have to be able to cope with challenges and adversity, and you have to tend to yourself. Judy and I have just finished a book on helping children with trauma, and one whole chapter is on teachers and self-care, and how we spend so much time working and helping our children that sometimes we get to the point where we need help ourselves. So we have to help our children and the students that we work with to have that same mindset that, yes, it's okay to just spend time helping yourself, to get away from things, to relax, to find things that allow you to just rebuild internally. Nan Henderson, who wrote a really nice article on education leadership, was talking about resilience. She said it's also fostering and strengthening those internal and environmental protective factors. Those are the factors that keep us from getting to the point where we can't function anymore. So we all have some of those. Some have more than others. Some are stronger than others. And it's helping our students to find those factors and to build upon those factors. So we've got them listed as far as working with our students. We've got environmental factors, which are things that are beyond our control. And then we have educational factors, some of which we can control and some of which we cannot. So we know our students are facing lots of issues in their home environment. Many of our kids are facing poverty. They may be experiencing societal or domestic violence, drugs in their community. For a lot of our students, their immigration status is nerve-wracking. What's going to happen if I come home? Will my parents be gone? It's all those kinds of issues. Bullying, homelessness, and helping them with their self-esteem, especially in our anti-immigrant society that we're living in today. And then we know our students have education factors as well. They have peer pressure. They want to be just like everybody else. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be the kid with the accent. They don't want to be the kid who looks different. So that's, how do we help them to feel comfortable in the classroom? The academic rigor that is pushed on us constantly, and we understand why, but it just is an added pressure on the students who are already not performing at grade level, and then it just makes them feel more different, that they can't be the same as the other children. Of course, their language barrier. If they have interrupted education, it adds to this. The importance of grades and test scores, graduation requirements that they may not understand or may not see any way they're ever going to be able to meet. And this all combines into motivation. So when we're talking about trauma, it's important that we discuss the ACEs. There was a study done in the 90s, and I think it was in California. It was a joint study with Kaiser Permanente Hospital System and the CDC, and they were looking at what causes some of the issues that adults were having, and trying to go back and see how far back and what types of things had caused these in their earlier life. So they were asking questions like, did you experience violence as a child? Did you see drug use as a child? Was there someone in your family in jail? Different kinds of questions. So as they looked through these, they had 10 different questions. When they looked at the results of those questions and the adults that they worked with, they found that the adults that experienced more of these adverse or negative childhood experiences were the ones who were experiencing more physical issues as adults. They were more likely to have obesity. They were more likely to have serious health issues. They were more likely to be using drugs and alcohol. So it was helping them to see the impact that childhood life has on our adult life. And we know that trauma is not the thing that happens to us, it's the result of those experiences. So two people can have the same experience, and one will have trauma because of it and one will not. And it could be from whatever protective factors we have. If you have a safe environment with your family, if you have a lot of self-esteem and you don't worry about how things are going to work out and so on, those kinds of things can keep you from experiencing the trauma. Or it can be a much more short-term kind of a experience. So how common are these ACEs? 36% have had none of these 10 things, and you can see some of them down at the bottom. Whether the mother was treated violently, whether there was substance abuse in the home, whether there was mental illness in the home, a separation and divorce, an incarceration of a family member. Those are 5 of the questions, and there were some other kinds of questions. So 26% had experienced one of these ACEs, 16% had 2, almost 10% had 3 of them, and 4 were experienced by about 12% of the students. And I was actually, just before we came online, I was reading an article about Latinos, and for our Latino children, about 40% of them have 4 or more of these ACEs. So just because of the way that their life is going right now, they are experiencing lots of childhood issues, and we're sure it's going to be causing more and more trauma for these children. So as we look at this prevalence of ACEs, 25% of children hard to cover basics like food or housing. 9% said they've lived with someone who've had either alcohol or drug issues. 25% are living with someone who's been separated or divorced. 6% saw or heard one of their parents be physically attacked. 4% was a victim or a witness to violence in the neighborhood. 8% lived with someone who's mentally ill, suicidal, or severely depressed. So this was just 2 years ago, and what our children are experiencing. This was all children, not just our immigrant children. And we know we have these education factors we talked about. How do these more rigorous standards impact the ability of teachers to assist? Because they are telling us now, you know, you must meet all these standards, you must cover all of this material. If the kids don't get it, move on because you've got so much you have to do. And it just adds stress to the teacher. It adds stress to the student. We understand why they do it, but it does have negative impacts on a lot of the people involved. Okay, and now Judy is going to take over for the remainder of our session.
Hi, I just want to go back to ACEs for 1 minute. After the study was done in the 90s, they sort of left it alone, but there's been a re-interest in, I don't know if that's a word, but a renewed interest in the study and to check on the population now, because the original finding of the study was that if someone had 4 or more of those ACEs, their lives were shortened significantly, and they were finding that people were dying in their 40s and 50s because of the stress from those ACEs. Okay, so this piece is going forward. This piece is from Nan Henderson, and she looked at what she called a resiliency wheel. This is easy. You can find this on Google Images if you wanted to download a copy for yourself. And she thought about what teachers could do. And she thought about these six things. And so you want to communicate high expectations, at the same time provide caring support. You want to teach life skills, but at the same time set clear and consistent boundaries. And you want to increase pro-social bonding, but you also want to provide opportunities for meaningful participation. So it's a balance between some things that provide guidelines and set barriers to the extent that students know that there is a certain amount that they can do before they're really out of, they're not being appropriate, and yet at the same time it's you're providing loving and caring support. So Brenda, let me see if I can go forward, but I can't find the arrow. Here it is, I got it.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not moving for me. Okay, could you move it?
Yep.
Okay, so we're looking next at internal protective factors for resilience. Okay, sorry I can't do it, it won't work. So here are some of the internal factors about fostering resilience in newcomers. And this comes from some of Henderson's work in a resilience workbook. Being flexible and having a sense of humor. And in thinking about that, we all have, obviously with COVID and being confined, and one of my wonderful experiences is spending 9 days in the house because the air was so bad I couldn't go out. So I have to think of that with a sense of humor, that when I get out, I can jump up in the air and be so excited and happy to be out. Fostering independence, helping students become self-motivated. Whoops. You went ahead.
I didn't do anything.
Okay, well.
All right, you want me to go back?
Yeah, please. Okay. And a sense of inner direction and developing your own life skills, a sense of your self-worth, relationships, and service and helpfulness in your relationships, working with others to help them, and having a positive view of your personal future and your perceptiveness. And the big thing is the love of learning. So, I mean, to me, the 2 things that stand out, or 3, a sense of humor is really significantly important. And we all need, right now with COVID, we need somewhat of a sense of humor that we're going to get through this, and we'll be able to go out to eat inside a building and go to the movies and all kinds of things. So, so you want to have this sense of a positive view of your future. Okay, Brenda, can you do the next one?
Yep.
So along with this, when we were looking at things about building resilience in learners, we we both came upon the work of Edith Grotberg, who was in Europe, and she had written a series of papers. She ended up back in the United States before she passed away, around 2007 or 8. She thought about students needing these three feelings. I have the resources that I have and the people that are available to me to offer me support in school and in my community, so that when things are tough, I can turn to those people. They're there for me. And knowing that, and not, being able to point to that yourself after developing the skills of knowing about I have, then I am a positive look at yourself and who you are. And finally, I can. So what can you do now, and what skills can you learn to deal with your interactions and problem solving in both in school and outside of school? So she looked at these three statements: the I have, I am, I can. Okay. So these are the strategies for newcomers. For strategy 1, for the I have, how can you build strong relationships as teachers with newcomers and their families? So it's not only the student looking, but the teacher also looking to build resilience in the newcomer. Strategy 2 is the I am, and talking about, and I've been doing some work on this called the power of the narrative, and looking toward writing your narrative, who I am, and then how your narrative changes over time, and teachers modeling their own narratives about who they are. And so by writing, the power of your story is very, very important. And over time, as you keep adding to the power of that story, you learn more and more about your own strength and who you are and what you can do. And 3 is the I can. So the power of that narrative builds into what you can do now and what you see yourself being able to do in the future. So using problem-based models. So here are some things that I've thought about and worked on and they're in our new book that should be out before the end of the year. So for I am, that power of the narrative can be reflective narrative writing. It can be a visual narrative, such as drawing, or as an individual or a group mural, who I am. What does my community tell me about myself? It can be a photo voice or a photo journal or a video of who you are. So the power of who you are. Okay. I have recognizing your assets and building relationships. Again, there can be another kind of mural that takes you to building your community in a map. So this is what I have. These are the people in my community that I have who help to support me. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is, and if you see this outline of a person, a teacher in in Columbus worked on this project with her students, and they put together collages of what they have. And they use different parts of the body, like who could help with their head, their thinking, their heart, their mind, their hands, the activities they could learn. And so alongside the blank one, you see the beginnings of one for a newcomer with some very beginning English language. So you can have a collage maker. You can do, one of my favorite things is the 6-word memoir, which is based on, whether it's true or not, a story about Ernest Hemingway when asked if he could write a memoir in 6 words. And he was sitting in a bar in Florida, and he sat down at the bar and he wrote a memoir in 6 words. And so having your students think about how they can write about themselves in 6 words, I have. So here's one from a student, part of 2 very different worlds. Then you have books that you can read, migration narratives and connecting life stories about students in, English language learners in different situations. Paper Sun is about a young boy who was sent here from China by his parents so that he would have a better life. And he was considered a paper son because a family adopted him, not legally, but they adopted him in the sense that there was this pretend paper indicating that this was a relative who lived in the United States who would take care of this child. Behind him is Angel Island, which is where on the West Coast where immigrants came through like they did in Ellis Island. So these migration narratives are helpful in terms of making that connection. Okay, next. So here are some books. We're book people. We both drown in books and work our way out of our home offices with lots of books all over the place. So here is some problems-based literature and models of instruction for solving problems, and what I can do now and what I hope to do in the future. There are a lot of books about Malala that are at all different levels of reading proficiency. Enrique's Journey, The Circuit by Francisco Jimenez, who actually lives near me in California and is an incredible speaker about his journey to America as a migrant child who worked the circuit of picking throughout Southern California and only went to school half of the school year. And he became university professor at Santa Clara University. Quest and Journey are part of a trilogy of wordless books. And Emmanuel's Dream is about a boy who wanted to be able to make a specific bicycle trip, but he was born with one leg. Okay, so those are kinds of things that you might want to think about for I have, I am, and I can. Some other thing, okay, so we want to talk about very briefly about building internal resilience. And so what students can look at through this visual is the circle of mastery, or things that they can do now. And then there is a grit point, and really thinking about all of our lives right now, we all have a grit point, lots of things we can't do because of the situations of the virus and how our communities are opening and sometimes then reclosing. So we have a grit point. And then, but for our students, it's the things that they can't do and how do they get beyond that grit point to their circle of growth, which is hopefully something that we will help them do to build that internal resilience. Okay. So in coming to conclusion, and actually we'll have time for some questions because we're a little bit early. You're looking at, the first part is in this pyramid is that you want to look at making sure your students have the basic needs, warmth, rest, the idea that they have food, water, they have a place to live and sleep, and that's something that the whole school can get involved with the family in terms of making sure that their needs are being met. And then their safety needs. One of the issues is always that a lot of these immigrant children and newcomers that come often live in, because of the rents are so high, they only live in communities where it is not really safe for them to go outside at night, and they're not used to living that way. Or they are, maybe they are, and they think America is a much safer place. And I have a really perfect example. I worked with some tutors who were working with Burmese families who had come to Oakland, California, and they were 3 generations of the same family. And the outreach by the tutors to the community brought each family a bicycle that the family could use to get around to, go shopping. So when they went back into their apartments, they just left the bicycles outside their doors. And many of the bicycles were stolen because they thought America was this great place where you didn't have to think about security. And so teaching about safety is really important as well. the feeling of belonging. And that's where those pieces of I have, I am, I can come in. Building those relationships and friends and making extensive interactions that you can then depend on others to help you. Sort of like Abraham. Abraham really succeeded because he had a teacher who really cared about him. And looking into your schools, are there communities of others who can work along with you that become support buddies to your students? Your self-esteem, your feeling of accomplishment, and how you can feel that your growth is happening. And that's where a piece about I am and I can come in, where who I am and what I can do now, and that continuous self-reflection on developing what you can do and how that expands. And then achieving your full potential. I wish we could find out about where Abraham is now. The article that we took from that story from is about 4 years old. So I assume he's finished with college at this point, but we don't have any follow-up that we can look to. And so you want to have success stories from their own native communities that you want to have students understand that they can too succeed. Okay. So here's some thoughts on resilience. The belief that there is a capacity for all learners to demonstrate resilience. This is one of the things that really stands out to me when I thought about in a former life being a middle school English teacher and on coming back to school and receiving my class rosters for my 9th grade English students, native English speakers, American students, and having the teacher from the year before say, oh, he's horrible. Oh, he's going to give you a really hard time. Oh, he's never going to learn. And, you know, you don't want to hear those stories. You want to believe in the capacity that every student in your room can learn and they can be resilient. And a lot of that comes from how you present yourself with your students and to your students. Resilience is a process. You have to learn how to navigate through, good days, bad days, walls that come up in front of your students, and how they can break through and reach to the resources that will help them to succeed. And every person has the capacity for resilience. We all have that capacity in us to be resilient learners, resilient people. We're actually demonstrating it right now as we go through several months of being in lockdown and little by little opening up to the rest of the world. So the protective factors are key to resilience. You have to have caring relationships. You also want to set high expectations, not indicate whether in words or body language or any other way that I don't expect much of you. I have high expectations for you to succeed. And providing opportunities for your students to participate and contribute in different ways within their educational and community environments. Okay. It's important for all learners, not just for those from adverse situations. And as each of us goes back to face-to-face learning at some point, resilience and learning to be part of a community will become important, really beyond English language learners, but for all learners. We've all had adverse situations over the past several months. Unfortunately, there's no program. You can't go on the internet and buy a resilience program for $50 or $100 and be able to show, teach it to your kids. You have to really do it day by day and think about how you will help them become resilient and recognize their own strengths. Resilient people really consider themselves to be survivors, not victims. And that's really important. And I think that's where the sense of humor comes in too. A friend of mine, when I told her that I can't wait to go back to the movies, I really miss sitting in the dark in a movie theater and eating popcorn. And she sent me 3 bags of microwavable popcorn in a little box saying, well, you can try practicing at home first by having popcorn and watching a movie on TV. So, thinking that it's a positive way of looking at things, so that you're thinking about, okay, I will eventually be able to go to the movies, but right now I can't, so I have to make the best of it. Um, it's not a problem-based intervention or a deficit model. It's it's a proactive model of looking at where you are now and where you can go and will go, and kind of charting that travel. The power of one is really important. And Abraham had his teacher who was his main person. She supported him and helped him to become resilient. And we all have students that we feel close to, and or gravitate to us, and we want to work with them. So kind of look out there into your environment of all your students, and how you can be the power of one for them, or help them find a peer that will help them become more resilient. Okay. So Mark Twain said, kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Kind acts are not just one ripple, but a rock skipping on water, radiating good deeds to multiple people who can also create those ripples. And this is from Teaching Tolerance. So think about those ripples you're creating when working with your students. Okay. So we have one book that we've written that's from Corwin, Students with Interrupted Formal Education, bringing, bridging where they are and what they need. So this was our first book together. This is an introduction to SIFE, Students with Interrupted Formal Education, and refugee students, and providing social and emotional support to develop resilience, and providing academic support are the chapters in this book. We have another book, which we are, right now we're proofing, and hopefully it'll be out before the end of the year. After we wrote the first book, we started to really think about trauma and how to build a resilient learner, and to work more deeply into that topic. This was actually before anything happened in terms of the pandemic. So we started writing this before the pandemic. What's a trauma-sensitive school and a classroom? What do they look like? What kind of strategies and activities could students do to show that they are developing their resilience, and things that help foster resilience in them? And then Brenda and I did some thinking about, we all work in situations where we're working with populations that of students that are really exhaust us, not purposely, but because we care, we become very exhausted. And so we thought about how to protect yourself against the effects of secondary trauma, and what would be a team response beyond the classroom to trauma in our students, and for our students and for our communities of practice. So we also have we have some resources in the book for personal migration and resilience narratives. We have a glossary, and each chapter is going to have for further study, so that they can be done by book groups. So we all know that there are days that we have to take a mental health day, because it's such a, being in the stressful situations that we work in really wears us down and exhausts us. And we just need a quiet day by ourselves to really pull ourselves back together and go forward. Okay. And this is us. I'm Judith O'Loughlin, and you heard Brenda. We have a website, newcomer-ellservices.com, which needs some updating, but we are, you can write to us through our website. I think the first slide had our email addresses, but if it didn't, we would be happy to provide them for you. And let's see if we have a few more. We have 5 minutes. We could probably answer some questions or comments. Okay. So yeah, let me put our emails in the chat box so you can write to us.
Yeah, that's a good idea. She's going to give you the emails.
These are our 2 emails. We generally don't give out our PowerPoint slides, but we can give you book lists. We can give you bibliography information about articles to read and so forth.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I don't see any questions here, but I see.
Okay, any recommendations for implementing these strategies in an online setting?
Yeah, we've been thinking about that too. Yeah.
If you have any, let us know.
Well, I think one of the things, is that okay if I talk?
Yes.
I think one of the things that I've been doing is that I've been writing narratives, and from my childhood and about my grandmother, which my own children never got to meet, and she was from Turkey, and the things that I learned from her. And so showing that in helping your students to write their own little narratives and modeling it for them is something you can probably do online. Or if you have Zoom times with your students, that's one thing you can do. They can do some webbing of what they can do. They can make tables and charts of what they can do, and you can have conversations about that. So that's 2 of the things I can think of that might help you do that. Because this is a tough time for everyone involved. I'm hearing more and more about little young learners, like from 5 to 8 years old, who are, they have their Zoom meeting with their teacher, and then they get off Zoom and then they go and cry because they can't play with their friends. So, there's a lot going on for all kids. So anything you can do to help them realize their strengths and who they are and what they can do is a good way to start. Do you want to add something to that, Brenda?
No, I was trying to figure out how to unmute everybody, but I don't know how to do it. I can unmute you one at a time.
Oh, yeah.
If anyone would like to talk, put your name in the chat box and I'll unmute you. At least I know how to do that.
Oh, Miriam, thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Yeah, I can't go out because of the smoke, so I'm going to have a wonderful weekend indoors.
Yeah.
Anyone want to ask a question or make a comment? Oh, one of the things we didn't mention, La Mariposa, is that it?
Yes.
That's a book about Francisco Jimenez, but it's for children. So if you have younger children, it's about a butterfly and his becoming a butterfly. Anyhow, so it's about Francisco Jimenez. So you might want to use that one as well to work with your students. Okay, we got 1 minute.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and we hope you contact us with any other questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I hope you do contact us, and also contact us with anything that you've tried.
Right.
We're always looking for things we can share with other people to tell them about what people have been in our sessions have done.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay.